Okay, standard 331, or key concept 331, is all about various innovations that are going to lead to increases in agricultural productivity and industrial production across the world. All right? So I'm just going to kind of give you a handful of things that people were doing in various regions of the world that were primarily allowing them to produce more food. 331. So we're going to go start with a place in East Asia. You guys can hardly see it here. What dynasty would this be? Just by looking at the shape? It is China. It's the Tang Dynasty. Very good. Remember, we talked the other day about how the Tang Dynasty is going to stretch across those Silk Roads and then come in contact with the Abbasid Caliphate. They're going to have a big battle called the Battle of the Talas River. Very good. Where Chinese win or the Muslims win? Muslims win. And hey, yeah, very good. I'm hearing a lot of people say Arabic, but we want to be careful with that now, because now at this point in human history, well, I guess I shouldn't say at the Battle of Talas, but certainly not long after, as Arab Muslims are going to take over eventually what once was known as Persia, and most of the Islamic world is going to be located outside of the Arabian Peninsula. Arabs are going to be a minority within Islam. Remember, Islam is a religion, not a race. And this is something that really comes up in modern debates about, like, whether are people being racist. I mean, I think we're playing with semantics. Are people being racist when they're being, like, anti-Islamic? Well, not really, because any race in the world can become Muslim, just as any race in the world can become Christian. So it's a religion. It's not an ethnic group, nor is it a race.
You can contrast that to Judaism.
You can contrast that to Judaism, where Judaism is a religion at the same time as is an ethnic group. There are very few non-ethnically Jewish people or non-racially Jewish people who have over the years converted to Judaism, while the vast majority of Muslims in the world today are not Arabs. The majority of Christians in the world today are certainly not, well, Christianity wasn't born there. They're not Jewish people of the Middle East. Anyway, let's run through a few agricultural developments and aids that are going to increase food production and ultimately increase populations in their areas. Again, we're going to talk about the Champa rice. And I like this map because as we go down and we look at Vietnam, this region of the present-day country of Vietnam was known as, Tyler? Champa. So it's Champa rice because that's where it came from. All right, it's separate from today. It's like today's Vietnam that we would see on a modern map encompasses many traditional kingdoms. So Champa is one of them, and the Tang Dynasty comes in contact with that, and they will bring Champa rice to the north. This is big because it ripens faster than the rice that the Chinese had traditionally grown. So it would ripen in less than 60 days, which means that you can have multiple harvests in one growing season.
That's why Vietnam produces so much rice compared to other countries.
Excellent, excellent. So now you could have 2 harvests in one growing season. This would lead to tremendous population growth and growth of cities, guys. When the same number of people can grow more food, more food throughout human history equals greater populations. But as you have greater populations for most of human history, you have to have more of those people now growing food because there are more people to feed. But with the advent, for example, of Champa rice, among many other agricultural developments, you can grow more and more food with fewer people. So now we were starting to get into a point in world history where we are producing more food and growing more people. Wow, that's a weird way to say it. We have growing populations, but we don't need that new population growth to continue to produce more food. So that leads to what? Well, go back to way in the beginning of all this, the Neolithic Revolution. The Neolithic Revolution was huge because now we started to produce what back in the back? Yes, but give me a word that kind of encompasses all of this.
Specialization of anger.
Very good. We have surplus food, surplus agricultural production, will lead to specialization in civilizations. More people being able to do more different kinds of jobs. So we're going to have growth in cities where you're not doing this farming. We're going to have new artisans, right? New laborers for other operations. We're kind of getting close to the development of what we will call the Industrial Revolution. It's a little ways down the line right now. But the idea is growing more food still, but getting people off of the farms to allow us to do different things. Say again? It's like, we would maybe call this the proto-industrial revolution. It's before, but it's kind of a little bit of a, what do we call it in English? Like a foreshadowing of something coming in the future. So excellent, Champa rice. Because AP World History does not want to make life easy on you, we have Champa rice, and then in Mesoamerica, oh, there's the Champa rice. Oh, you can't see it there. I can see it there. There's the Champa rice. Because AP World does not want to make life easy on you, now we're going to go to Mesoamerica, the Aztecs, and we're going to talk about the Chinampa field system.
What?
Oh, man, we couldn't have given it a very different word, could we have? Could make it easy for us. Champa rice, the Chinampa field system. Chinampa. The Chinampa, yeah, there you go. The Chinampa field system. Many people weren't even thinking that until you put it in their head. Now they're going to get it wrong. Thanks a lot. The Chinampa field system. This is in Mesoamerica, the Aztec. All right? If we recall, the Aztec built their greatest city in the middle of a lake, Lake Texcoco, right? And they built that city and they called it Tenochtitlan. And it became a massive city of over a couple 100,000 people. And those people needed to eat. And they've got kind of the opposite problem from a lot of civilization. You know, many people with massive populations that they're struggling to feed often have a hard time with finding good, arable, fertile land to grow the food on. Well, the Aztec have that problem in spades because they've built their civilization upon a lake. They don't have a lot of land, all right? They've built a massive city in the middle of a lake, and there's just not a lot of land. And remember, when we talked about the Aztec, they weren't big into creating a massive empire, right? They didn't want to conquer all of the peoples around them because they needed to exploit those populations for what?
Tribute. Sacrifice.
For tribute, for human sacrifice. So they weren't into creating massive plots of land or taking over massive plots of land for agricultural development. So the Aztec used what's called the Chinampa system, where they would go into the shallow waters of their lakes and the rivers feeding into it and the tributaries feeding into it, and they would start to dig up the muck at the bottom of that lake. And like, you know, you're standing in a lake, you start kicking a bunch of sand, and eventually that pile might grow pretty large. Well, if you get a lot of people working on it, you can grow that pile of muck at the bottom of the lake so large that eventually it'll pop up above the bottom, the surface of the lake. And you've created a little tiny island. You've created a little tiny island that is going to be ridiculously fertile because it is made from the stuff from the bottom of the lake, and it's perpetually surrounded by water. Irrigation will never be an issue. They've got like the opposite problem for most farmers throughout human history. Most farmers had to worry about how they irrigate their land. These guys have to worry about actually creating land, okay, because they've got just too much water. So this is the Chinampa system. It's used by the Aztecs in the marshy lands in and around Lake Texcoco to turn those shallow lakes into small agricultural plots. And this idea still exists today. Here is modern-day Chinampa farming. So it still happens.
Wait, how? This takes a lot of work because you're
Yes!
trying to bring like mud from the bottom of the
Yes!
lake.
Yes! But guess what? There's a lot of people for labor.
It doesn't sound
Right?
efficient though.
It doesn't sound what?
It doesn't sound efficient.
Well,
Better than not having any food.
necessity is the mother of invention, right? Like, people will do big things to feed themselves because that's survival. So it might not sound efficient, but we're going to look at a lot of things today that don't seem very efficient at the start. But how do you know it is the best way it could have been done? Because it was done. If there was a better way at the time to do it, if there was a better way to feed themselves at the time, we would be talking in AP World, we either wouldn't be talking about this, or we would say, well, they did this, but then they realized that this was stupid and horribly inefficient, so they decided to do something else. They did this because this is what they had to do, and this is what worked best for them. Was it easy? Absolutely not, but a lot of what we're going to talk about today was not easy. Let's go further to the south, in the Andes Mountains of the, what empire? Incan Empire. They've got the opposite problem from the Aztec. The Aztec are in a valley, in a lake. They've got plenty of water. They don't have enough land. The Incans are in the highlands or in the mountains of the Andes Mountains, right? They've got plenty of land. They don't have enough water. So they would use a system called waru-waru, W-A-R-U space, W-A-R-U, waru-waru. And this was done in the highlands of South America, in the Andean highlands of South America. And they, kind of like the Chinampas system, would build like raised mounds of earth within those highlands. And then create like lower mound, like you wouldn't call them lower mounds, they would create like trenches around these raised mounds of earth that they're creating. And then you could grow food upon the raised mounds of earth, but then those trenches could collect water, like rainwater, all right? And so as those trenches collect and hold the rainwater, that rainwater will irrigate these small plots of land that they've now created. Good? Let's look at modern-day waru-waru systems in the mountains of South America, in the highlands of South America. Might look something like this, all right? Looks very similar to Chinampa, but we want to realize that this is being done up in the mountains. This water is not coming just right from the lake next door to you. This water is maybe going to be collected from rainwater and diverted in, or maybe some other, if there is some river movement or streams up in the highlands, diverting those to fill these up. Yes?
In Vietnam, it's really interesting in Vietnam because Champa rice down in the south.
Yeah.
Because in the south there is like just plains.
Yeah.
That's why water flows from the Mekong just like
Yeah.
really easy, just plant in the bottom. But in the north, before we had Champa,
Yeah.
before we annexed it, we had to make rice on the mountains, just like the Andes. But it's really interesting because that's not the way we do it. The way we do it is that we build it into steps.
We're going to talk about that next. So, good segue to another development that's going to aid in agriculture, both in East Asia and in Southeast Asia, as Tyler's just letting us know, and in the Andes of South America. This is called terracing. So if we want to think about how human beings have an impact on the environment around them, this is great stuff for adding into an APSA like that. Yes, ma'am? South America, anywhere there's highlands, all right, mountains. The Andes in South America, or in East Asia, like in northern Vietnam or the southern part of China. You got a lot of mountains, a lot of highlands there. So this is terrace farming, where you will literally cut into the mountainside and create these steps. And so now we're taking what was formerly like just a flat slope as it would go down the mountains, and we're just carving in steps. Does this look efficient? Does this look easy to do? Absolutely not. This is a tremendous undertaking that's bringing tremendous change to the natural environment. But once you've done it, each one of these steps, now the faces of those steps can each become, or the foot of those steps, can now each become more farmland that you wouldn't otherwise have. All right? So this is terrace farming, sculpting the mountains to provide flat platforms for agriculture. And it kind of looks like a lot of times when human beings do things to the natural environment, you're like, man, I wish we didn't do that. These just look kind of cool.
Yeah, it looks really
But
nice.
a tremendous toll on the natural environment, absolutely. Here's another one. This is in China. This one's in China. This is in South America. So you can see, which I love this, because you know there is absolutely, during this time period, there's absolutely no contact between the people, the Incan people of the Andes, and the people of northern Vietnam or East Asia. There's absolutely no contact. They're not running into each other and like sitting around a table and realizing that each other has a hard time coming up with enough arable land that they can grow their food on. And they say, well, hey, Why don't we try this? And they work it out together and they take their plans back home. That's not happening. They're doing it on their own, which really shows you something about human ingenuity. Like necessity is the mother of invention. I said that earlier. When you've got a problem, you often figure out a solution to that problem. And sometimes our solutions are identical. Now, here is where I'm going to give a little nod of, wow, South America, you are truly impressive with what you did. Maybe even a little more impressive than what they were doing in East Asia. Because in South America, these mountains are being cut without what benefit that East Asia would have had. Yeah, we don't have the wheel to help cart a lot of this crap away, nor do you have an abundance of these pack animals that they would have had in East Asia that can aid in moving things out. All right? So, props to you, Incans in South America. Yes, Alex?
Can't help but say, like, all three of these methods you mentioned so far, that they still see, like, with the exception of probably the third one, like terracing, like, the first two were just, like, I don't know how to say it, like, really inefficient. Like, why would you do that? It's just,
Because they didn't want to starve.
like, you could just, there's other ways to get food. I don't know, like,
But it isn't. Because
Let's just go back to this. Notice this picture. This is not some drawing. This is not some drawing of what they did 1,000 years ago. It's a modern picture. These still exist and they're still farmed
people
today.
use that in North Vietnam.
This is a modern picture. This is still used today. This is a modern picture. This is still used today. To me, that says they wouldn't do it if it wasn't their best option like, they don't have Kansas, right? A big, open, flat expanse of land with relatively fertile soil. They don't have that. So they've got to adapt to their own environment. And yeah, it's certainly hard work. It's certainly hard work. But they must do it or they don't survive. And so there isn't a better option in the apps. Yes, it would be easier if they had like better land where they didn't have to do that. But they don't. So they had to adapt. All right? Cool. Let's press on a little bit. We're almost done here. I haven't talked at all about Western Europe. Now, we did mention this a few weeks ago when we were talking about Western European development. But let's remind ourselves that they were also developing some advancements that would allow them to produce more food. This is a drawing of what is known as the three-field system. Historically, prior to the Middle Ages, farmers traditionally grew their food on half of their land, grew their production on half of their land, and left the other half, what we would say is fallow. Leaving your land fallow means you're not doing anything with it. You're letting it rest. You can let it replenish its nutrients. Because when we grow produce on our land, it saps that earth of the nutrients that are used by that production, right? And this all predates like modern development of modern fertilizers, right? So we can't just, poof, magically replenish the nutrients in that land and allow that food to still grow. So traditionally, farmers grew on half of their land, and then they left the other half fallow. During the High Middle Ages, around the year 1000, farmers in Western Europe started to use a three-field system, where they would divide their property into thirds, and maybe grow one crop like wheat on one third, leave another third fallow, and grow barley on a third. Now, barley is just another grain. All right. There's animals going to be on here, and that's good. They can eat the grasses that are just going to grow naturally. And then what else are those animals going to do as they're making their way over that field? They're going to be pooping all over the place, which is going to be a natural fertilizer for that land. So when the next season comes along, you can now plant on that, but maybe this field too will be left fallow. And so this is going to increase their ability to, instead of growing on only 50% of their land, now they're going to be growing food on 2/3 of their property. All right? So it's a pretty dramatic increase in food production, but the same numbers of farmers doing the work. So that's good. Also in Western Europe, we're going to see some developments of agricultural implements. We've already mentioned these in this class, but the Moldboard iron plow that can now be pulled by horses using a new horse collar or a harnessed horse collar that does not choke the horses as they can pull this plow. So now you guys have a lot of ammunition for a great paper that you might one day have to write on agricultural advancements of the post-classical era. Good? Good. A couple other ideas that pop up in this standard are just the notion that that we're also going to see in China, in India, in the Persian regions of the Middle East, increased production of luxury goods. As the world is going to become more connected because of trade in this era, one of the primary goods that will be traded will be these luxury items, like silk, like porcelain, textiles, like cotton production, and making cloth out of that. Because those are highly profitable goods to produce, and they're relatively easy to transport. They're relatively light compared to the wealth that you can exchange them for. And so in all of these regions, China and India and in the Middle East, we're going to see increased production and state support for increased production of these goods so they can be traded for outside wealth and transporting them further and further to the West. All right? Questions, comments, concerns?